Hi everyone, I'm Graham Maidment. I'm from the UK government, and welcome to one of the coolest events of COP. So it's great to see you all here, and I just wanted to do a little quick introduction before I hand over to the real people that are going to tell you stuff. So 2023 was the warmest year on observational record, and that coincided with the launch of the Global Cooling Pledge, which was really important for us in the cooling space. The Cooling Pledge was signed at COP29, and we're going to hear a little bit about it, with a focus on sustainable and accessible cooling. The UK was very central to the pledge, and we are very active domestically on cooling and also internationally in the cooling space. And the event today is a bit of a celebration of the activity in that space. We brought together a number of colleagues from different organisations across government and internationally to talk about what we're doing domestically and what we're doing internationally on sustainable and accessible cooling. So we've got effectively 4 parts to today. We've got some opening remarks from Minister McCarthy and from the Cool Coalition, Lily Riahi. We then have a quick panel on activities that are taking place in the UK, so a panel on activities internationally, and then some closing remarks. And then we have a celebration in here. It's a drinks reception, so we can toast cooling. Okay, clear? Okay, so I'm going to kick off by handing over to Minister McCarthy, who's going to, I should have shown that slide already, who's going to give us an introduction to cooling. So please, Minister.
Thank you. You already stole my joke about it being the coolest event in COP, so there you go. I think it's fair to say this is an issue that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to the fight against climate change, but it is absolutely critical that we act on cooling if we are to meet net zero in a warming world. Can people hear me okay? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Cool. Just last month, the UN's emission gap report said that we are now on course for a 3.1 degrees temperature rise, leading to further catastrophic weather events. And extreme temperatures pose one of, if not the biggest danger to human life. Already 30% of the world's population is exposed to life-threatening temperatures for at least 20 days of the year. That is nearly 2.5 billion people. According to the Cool Coalition, cooling will be one of the top drivers of global electricity demand over the next 3 decades. By 2050, space cooling alone will consume as much electricity as China and India today. So as the temperatures rise, international collaboration remains a critical enabler for delivering impact. The UK is already taking action to reduce inefficient, pollutant cooling from many sectors, and we are actively involved in action both domestically and internationally, and you'll hear about some of that in this session. We are proud to have played a key role, as was already mentioned, in launching the Global Cooling Pledge at last year's COP28. And this pledge sets out a joint international commitment to mitigate emissions from cooling, as well as promoting access to sustainable cooling. One of its key commitments is to work multilaterally with our global partners with the aim of achieving a 68% reduction in global emissions from cooling by 2050. Another commitment is to develop a cooling outlook, and this will involve the development and publication of a plan which brings together all our activities in sustainable cooling in one place, but also identifies gaps and opportunities. The pledge has now been signed by 71 countries, and I'd like to give a special thanks for the hard work of the UNEP-led Cool Coalition, who have been instrumental in its deployment, and I'm delighted we have the Global Coordinator, Lily, here today, who will speak straight after me. The UK is a supportive member of this coalition, and we will continue to do all we can to achieve the required reduction in cooling-related emissions. For example, we are supporting the African Centre of Excellence in Sustainable Cooling, focused on the development of sustainable cooling solutions in Africa. We're also providing leadership of the Super Efficient Appliance Deployment Initiative with the IEA. And we are supporting the £1 billion Ayrton Fund with a specific focus on technical assistance and knowledge transfer from the UK. The Ayrton Fund aims to accelerate the clean energy transition in developing countries by creating and demonstrating innovative clean energy technologies and business models. It will demonstrate UK leadership and expertise in cutting global emissions through world-leading innovations. And finally, domestically, the northern city of Manchester is displaying leadership thanks to its Mayor Andy Burnham raising standards for passive cooling in the many thousands of buildings in the Greater Manchester area. As temperatures rise, we have a duty to keep our communities safe and comfortable. Cooling is part of a broader system and is critical to the homes and cities in which we live and the energy systems and industries we rely upon. And I think the heat wave we saw in the UK in 2022 very much demonstrated the need for preemptive action before temperatures rise again. We know that unilateral action will be insufficient to deliver the energy transition and achieve the scale needed to make a real difference. And to meet our goals, we must harness the full power of collective action. We're looking forward to working across sectors through existing efforts underway on the power breakthrough, which we co-lead with Morocco, who are also spearheading work under the Buildings Breakthrough in partnership with France. In a warming world, we must continue to strive for a clean solution to cooling and safeguard the lives of billions of people for the better. You will hear about some of the exciting initiatives and activities that the UK leads on in this session to follow. I hope you find it of interest. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks very much, Minister McCarthy, for your support and your encouragement and shining a light on this really important topic. And we're going to now hear from Lily. Lily's been mentioned already. Lily is the Global Coordinator of the Cool Coalition. And I got to know Lily about 4 or 5 years ago when she formed the Cool Coalition. Lots of people, lots of organisations have been working in the sustainability cooling space for a number of years. But they all describe sustainability and cooling slightly differently, and they struggle to work together. But what Lily has done is she's pulled everyone together. She's created this sort of strategy where people work together and give a clear voice. And I'd like to hand over to Lily and to tell us what she's been doing with the Coal Coalition. So over to you, Lily. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Can you hear me with this? Yes? Okay, great. Yeah, I think if there's one thing that unites all of us, it's that we're all increasingly feeling the heat. As Minister McCarthy said, extreme temperatures are no longer a 1 day, a 1 week, or a 1 month phenomenon. And behind these record-breaking temperatures are real human lives and economies at stake. Extreme heat amplifies inequality, it inflames food insecurity, and it pushes people further into poverty. And as said by the UN Secretary General in his call to action on extreme heat, we must respond to the impacts of extreme heat by massively scaling up access to low-carbon cooling. Cooling is much more than air conditioning, although that is important enough. It is also about keeping food fresh, our vaccines stable, and our economies productive. And as the Honourable Minister just mentioned, the demand is growing fast. Indeed, it is the second largest driver of electricity demand after industry. And today, it already consumes 20% of electricity globally. 20% is for cooling. Without strong policy action, the demand for cooling equipment will grow threefold. That will strain our electricity grids and double our emissions by 2050, up to 10% of projected emissions that year. So this makes cooling an energy and a climate issue, It makes it a growing energy and climate issue, and it makes it a just transition issue. Not only are the poorest and the most vulnerable exposed to the climate impacts, but they are the least likely to have access either to the means to pay for the higher electricity bills that come from inefficient cooling, or to even access cooling as the world warms. Luckily, solutions exist. UNEP's Global Cooling Watch report, prepared collectively through the Cool Coalition, shows us that concerted action on 3 measures: passive cooling, so urban design, nature-based solutions, reflective materials, smart buildings, passive cooling, energy efficiency of equipment, and the faster phase down of refrigerants, or fast action on refrigerants, can deliver over 60% of emissions while protecting an additional 3.5 billion people from the impacts of extreme heat. That also means saving on consumer electricity bills by $1 trillion and enhancing grid stability by 2050. These actions are what we can, and these benefits are what we can deliver through the Global Cooling Pledge. And that's why UNEP and its Cool Coalition was very pleased to have worked with early supporters like the UK to support the COP28 presidency launch the landmark Global Cooling Pledge. The UK, as an early supporter and as an executive committee member of the Cool Coalition, has been instrumental in the design and delivery of the Global Cooling Pledge, which calls for integrated action on all 3 fronts: passive cooling, energy efficiency, and fast action on refrigerants. And the UK, as we heard from Minister McCarthy, is indeed walking the talk in implementing domestically, such as from nature-based solutions to tackle extreme heat all the way to the National Cooling Outlook, as well as internationally, as we heard, through support to the African Centre on Sustainable Cooling and Cold Chain, indeed the Arten Fund, which is providing technical assistance to countries who have signed the pledge to actually be able to implement those commitments. So I would like to personally thank you, Minister McCarthy, for your continued support and leadership on the global cooling agenda. It's an international challenge, and we really must work together if we're going to keep the 1.5 degrees in reach. So my thanks to you all again, and especially to the UK for bringing us here this evening to recognize the importance of cooling. I hope we can take the momentum we have, push on action, and deliver crucial results on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lily. That was tremendous. And now we're going to do a family photo, okay? And normally it's often the family photo is just the panelists, but today we're going to do it differently. Anyone that's got any interest in cooling, please come to the stage and take part in the family photo. And by interest, okay, I mean, even if you've got a fridge at home, yeah, that counts, okay? Please come to the front and let's have a family photo of everyone involved in cooling, please. I did the same last year. And don't be shy. That's it. Come on, don't be shy.
It's really inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go to the back.
Well, no, you need to be in the.
No, that's fine. I can be there. Amir, let's budge up a bit. One, two, three. Refrigeration! That's great. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, everyone. That's great. We will circulate the picture. Yeah, we will. That's great. Okay, thanks very much.
No,
that's fine. Thanks very much. Okay, so there's an email address at the end, okay, that you'll be able to email if you want a copy of the picture. Okay, so at the end there, then. Just to keep you involved. Okay, so now what we're going to do is hear about some of the amazing stories that are going on, and specifically, I'm going to introduce my colleague Mel, who works with me.
Hi everybody, I'm a technical advisor at DESNES and I work on making sure that our policies are underpinned by evidence. And I'm accompanied here by three amazing panelists who each represent the three actions Lily were talking about. So if we just go to the next slide, we'll just quickly see why, I told you I'm a technical evidence person, so I have to start this with some technical evidence, showing you guys how much the cooling demand has increased from 1982 to 2022 in loads of different European cities. So cooling is a problem for lots of different cities and lots of different environments. We're going to talk here about why cooling and what is important in the UK and what people are doing about it. So I'll give you a chance here to say what you do and why cooling is important to you.
So, can you hear me? Yes? So my name is Anastasia Mylona. I'm the Technical Director of the Chartered Institution of Building Service Engineers, or CIBSE, in the UK. So our members are the ones that design, install, operate cooling, heating, ventilation systems. So it is our members, and as an organization, it's our responsibility to make sure that what we design is efficient, sustainable, and resilient for the future. So at the moment, the building industry is very much focusing on decarbonization of heat and decarbonization in general of buildings. But what we also need to remember, and what the Minister already highlighted, and Lily, the fact that the climate is changing and we are committed to that change until at least the middle of the century. What that means is that the dynamic between the heating and the cooling demand is going to change. So now we have heating that is quite high. In the future, we are going to have cooling. So we need to be prepared, and we need to be now ready to design for that future.
Thanks, Anastasia. Xinfang, you want to tell us who you are and why cooling is important to you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Xinfang Wang. I'm Associate Professor at Birmingham Energy Institute in the University of Birmingham. I lead several projects on both food and pharmaceutical cold chain for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Cooling is very important to me because it is a global challenge and it is so relevant to our everyday life. So take refrigerated transport as an example. It's essential to deliver our food and medicines from manufacturer to our plate and also to the patients. However, it's not only about chilled and frozen temperature. Actually, all medicines in ambient temperature, they need to be temperature controlled to between 8 and 25 degrees C as well. The cold chain face both challenges of climate mitigation and adaptation. So from the mitigation perspective, refrigerated transport has emissions from refrigerant leakage, but also the fuel for power the refrigeration unit and also the energy for running the vehicles. So it needs to go to zero carbon refrigerant and also zero carbon energy. And from adaptation aspect, so in the UK, traditionally the refrigeration system is set to be operate under a maximum 32 degrees C ambient temperature, because that's the temperature we normally had historically in the UK. However, since the more recent heat waves, we are facing more challenges. For example, the heat wave 2 years ago, lots of the supermarkets had to empty their fridge freezer because of the failed refrigeration system. So with the more longer duration, more frequent and higher extreme temperature in the future, we have like urgent and important problem to solve.
Yeah, thanks. So we've got cooling in homes and cooling in supermarkets and the cold chain. Jane, why is cooling important to you?
Well, thank you. Well, cooling is important to the IEA as efficient cooling is such an important part of our overall decarbonization pathway. I think, as Lily said, it's 40% of electricity demand, and I think it's almost hard to really take that in, what that means, but we all who are here know that it's something that we really need to be focused on globally. Now, for me, at the IEA, I actually lead our people-centered team, so it's a little bit of a different perspective on this issue. And I want to echo some of what Lily also brought up, because for me and my team, efficient cooling is really important to people's lives, their livelihoods, their health, and their well-being. And as we think about these clean energy transitions, ensuring that we are really focused on efficient cooling and that we're not saying, as a global community, some people shouldn't have access to air conditioning, some people shouldn't have access to cooling because of the emissions. What we need to be thinking about is some countries need to be, growing very efficiently, and others need to be really decreasing their use. But we want to make sure that everybody has access to efficient cooling.
Thanks. Yeah, so we need more cooling and it's getting hotter, but it's not all doom and gloom, and it can't be when we all get on stage for a family photo. There's also good news, isn't there? What are we doing at CIBSE?
So we have been working really closely with policy to launch the Part O. So that is a new part of the building regulations that is looking at how new buildings, new homes can be mitigating the risk of overheating. So why I'm mentioning this is because it's introducing a very fundamental concept for the industry, which is a risk-based assessment. So we don't know how the climate is going to change, but we're very privileged in the UK. We have the UK climate projections, and that provides us with multiple scenarios of how the climate is going to change. So we took that and we created various what we call weather files that you can check the performance of the building and assess how it's going to respond to these different climate scenarios.
Okay, that's great, but that's future-proofing new builds. What about existing buildings?
Yes, very good question. Yes, so yes, absolutely. And this is, if you want, the next challenge. We have a massive stock that at the moment is overheating already, and that is just with today's climate. If we are talking about future increases in the climate, then we need to address the existing stock. The challenge with the existing stock is that you have less options. So with a new stock, with a new building, you can change the fabric, you can have shading, you can do things that it's much harder to do in the existing stock. So, but there are solutions, and so the next challenge now for policy and for industry is to start looking at existing stock and start future-proofing it with systems and also passive measures, very important.
Yeah, because sometimes insulating can stop overheating, but also, right? So it can also be good to insulate.
It's good. Insulation is very good. The problem with insulation is that it needs to come with ventilation, because otherwise, if you have an extended period of hot event, it just accumulates. It stops it, it delays it, but it accumulates slowly. And then you need to have the kind of natural ventilation options to take the heat out of the building.
Yeah, because you don't want to trap the heat in.
No.
Yeah. Thanks, Anastasia. We're not just trying to keep our homes cold, aren't we? We're also trying to keep our food and our pharmaceutical products cold, and we're going to need that more. What solutions are there for that?
I think one thing we definitely need is we need all stakeholders to take a whole systems perspective and collaborate together. So the whole system perspective need to consider all the different disciplinary aspects and also the interlinks among them. So it's not only about technology innovation in refrigeration system, transport system, or energy system, but it's also about policy and regulation. For example, how they track the number of refrigeration units and monitor them, and also look at the financial barriers for the industry, what support and innovative business model need to help them with the transition. but also, for example, what need to be trained of the staff member and the younger generation to work in the cold chain sector, and how the consumers' behaviors would shift the future of the logistics and the cold chain. So, for example, since the COVID pandemic, more consumers has transferred to more online shopping for food rather than going to a supermarket in person. So lots of supermarkets had closed and transferred to more online delivery, and this would transfer or change the logistics towards more last mile delivery with vans and probably less use of trucks and trailers. And this has both advantages and challenges. It could be easier to decarbonize because vans might be easier to decarbonize and electrified, while trucks and trailers are harder. But also, in the UK, we are lack of regulations in terms of converting vans into refrigerated vans in terms of the refrigeration units that used in them. So if like the vehicle go across the border, they need the we call it ATP certificate to approve their refrigeration units. But if they only travel within the UK, there's no such regulation. And that's what most refrigerated vans do. So it's a good example to show that how the policy need to follow with the industry for the shifts that's actually transferred by the consumer behaviors. So we need all the stakeholders from the industry, the government, academia and also citizens to work together. It's a complex system. That's why we tend to often run the participatory system mapping workshop, which have all the stakeholders across the sectors to sit in one room and have the discussion. And the aim is exactly to help all stakeholders to visualize the complex systems and then see how the change in one area or one factor could lead to unintended consequences in many other areas. The last point is that the cold chain is a global system. So so the UK import lots of food and medicine products from across the border, like in the UK or the rest of the world. So how those countries are affected by the climate change will directly affect the security and quality of the product supply in the UK.
Yeah, thanks, Jingfang. So you're saying how we all need to work together to make sure we decarbonize the whole system, but we also need to make sure that the technologies exist, right? So that, as you were saying, Jane, that it has to be accessible to all. So what innovation is needed to make sure that we have the technologies there to achieve this global change we need?
Well, first of all, let me give a big shout out to the UK and to the SEED initiative, the Super Efficient Equipment and Appliance Deployment Initiative, of which the UK is one of the 4 key members, or the 4 lead members. For those of you who don't know, SEED gathers 25 member countries sharing experiences on all aspects of product efficiency. So ACs and cooling is one part, but also on other appliance-related topics. And I do think that it's initiatives like SEED that bring together different countries to really share information, to share technology, and to push each other, frankly, on things like appliances and standards is really key. But so thank you to the UK for your leadership there. But to answer your question about innovation, so I would say there's a few things. I mean, first of all, we need good standards everywhere. We need good standards, which are the basis, really, of energy efficient products. And that's easy to, we can all agree on that, but we know that that's actually already still a problem. And we need to make sure that there's regional harmonization of these standards, which really empower governments and support stakeholders to make the easiest choice, which is the choice for the best product. Once we see that regionalization of standards for consumers, it's going to become much easier to just not even have the choice. We will drop the worst out of the market, which is really key. 2 other quick points that I want to make. One is on workforce. We have to make sure that we have the workforce ready to really be installing all of the cooling equipment that we need. We know that we already don't have the workforce today, and with what we're expecting in growth to 2030, we're going to have a problem. And the 4th, and I know that we're all probably singing out of the same songbook on this, is Are you ready? Should we all say it together? Do you know what I'm going to say? Consumer behavior. We really need to work on communicating with our consumers, or else we're not going to get there. We know that the efficient products are out there. We know that they're cost effective and cost competitive, and yet we still see consumers not going for them. So this is something that we all really need to work on together to get to 2030.
Can I say something about technologies? Because I think now we are at that point where we are questioning a lot of things, right? So we are talking about heat pumps. Heat pumps not just for industrial buildings, but actually our homes. And now is the point where we need to think about, okay, heat pumps for heating, but what about cooling? How can these systems, heat pumps or other, how can the systems that we install now, we retrofit and install in new buildings, can adapt and evolve to work for a warming climate and change that dynamic between the heating and cooling. So I think now is the time to have, like we were discussing earlier, the new system that controls, that we understand better the demand and the dynamic, and we future-proof our buildings.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you everybody for telling us a bit more about why we can be optimistic about achieving the cooling demand that we need despite it being a warming world. We've talked about what's going on in the UK, and I bet you can't wait to hear what's going on across the world. So I'm going to introduce you to our next chair, chairing the international panel.
Thank you. Oh, you have the... Yeah, sure. Perfect. Okay. So, thank you very much for having me. In particular, of course, to the UK for inviting me, but to Graham personally as well for the great collaboration so far. So we just learned a little bit about the national context, and now we want to understand a little bit, zoom out at the global level, and discuss how leading international action is being taken to really cope with the extreme heat challenges that we have towards 2050. My name is Giorgio Rambelli. I'm the director of the Urban Transition Mission of Mission Innovation. And our mission is specifically, oh yes, it was already there. Thank you. Our mission is specifically working to mobilize policymakers across different levels and to bring together a cohort of right now 100 ambitious cities from 43 countries, including Greater Manchester, by the way, to really deploy pathways that can help transition communities to net zero, resilient and inclusive future. So our cities are feeling the heat. We talked about people feeling the heat, but our cities are also feeling the heat. We expect that the world could warm up about 4.4 degrees in the next few decades, and we have a growing urban population that will be feeling the damages that this increase in temperature will bring. We have already heard both from the minister, but also from Lily, how there will be an escalating demand for electricity that will damage the stability of our grids, and new solutions need to be found both for the urban system but also for communities that are rural and that are outside of the, let's say, main infrastructures, looking into natural-based solutions, looking into different ways also to understand urban planning to facilitate solutions for cooling our world. We also already heard a few times how households are already being impacted by extreme heat, and in particular how the most vulnerable are the ones paying the biggest toll on this, creating a de facto cooling poverty that is increasingly across the board. So with this panel and with this consideration at the backdrop, we want to discuss key challenges across sectors. We also want to understand what solutions are out there across the world to accelerate access to sustainable cooling, and also what type of knowledge, opportunity and technical assistance is available to help this important transition happen. So I would like to call on stage my wonderful panel now. First and foremost, Jakub Verba is a senior researcher lead at the Energy Saving Trust. I will also call up on stage Dr. Jean-Baptiste Ndahetuye from the Africa Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooling and Cold Chain. And then finally, last but not the least, Paul Durant from the Department for Energy Security here, host of us from the UK. So thank you very much for joining me in this panel. I don't see Jean-Baptiste. Oh, he's online. Great. Hello,
I'm
Jean-Baptiste.
joining online. Thank you.
You can hear us?
Hello. I can hear you very well. I can hear you very well. Do you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly. And you know what? I'm just going to go closer to my panelists, if you don't mind. Perfect. And similarly to the previous conversation, I think we want to start by asking personally to all of you, why is cooling so important for you? And not just for you, Jakub, maybe I will start with you, but also for those who lack access to reliable cooling solution in off-grid areas.
Thank you, Georgia, and thank you for having me. My name is Jakub Verba, and I lead the Energy Access Research Portfolio at Energy Saving Trust. Energy Saving Trust is a UK-based organization aiming to tackle the climate emergency. And as many of you may know, most of our work is focused on the UK on energy efficiency of buildings. But what I will talk about today here is about our work in the international team, which is supported by the UK government through the Transforming Energy Access platform, which is part of the wider Earth Fund challenge that was mentioned by Minister McCarthy, where sustainable cooling for all is a very important challenge for all of us to tackle. Now, many of us take cooling services for granted, but there are 1.2 billion people, so 1 in 7 on this planet, who have no access to reliable cooling. And this lack of access is mainly because people who lack access to cooling are mostly in off-grid rural areas where they have no access to electricity, and therefore their access to cooling solutions is very limited. Now, this gap is most staggering across 3 sectors: in health, of course, to save the vaccines; in agriculture, to reduce post-harvest losses and improve food security, to store fresh produce; and perhaps most importantly, in space cooling for people to cope with these extreme heat waves, especially in the global south, that are becoming more and more frequent, as Lily mentioned in the opening remarks. So what I would like to talk about today is about the off-grid cooling, its importance, and put it on the agenda at these cooling discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for reiterating how, when we are talking about the challenges that cooling is bringing to us, we are not talking just about energy, we are not just talking about even the comfort within our buildings, we're really talking about instrumental parts of our system, like the food system that you just mentioned, and of course health. So thank you very much for that. Jean-Baptiste, I'd like to come to you, if that's okay, and ask you the same question. Why is cooling important to you, but also why is cooling important for the access to sustainable cold chain solutions in Africa in particular?
Thank you so much. I'm Jean-Baptiste and I lead research at the Africa Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooling and Cold Chain, an innovative UK-supported vehicle to really accelerate uptake and adoption of sustainable, resilient, inclusive, climate-friendly cooling and cold chain in Rwanda and in Africa. Cooling is so important in Rwanda and Africa, especially to reduce food loss, and where majority of population live on agriculture, 70%, and they are small scale. We are talking about less than 2 hectares of land. If the food they produce is even lost, that is present even more challenge for hunger and for economically empowering farmers through generating income from the food they produce through export and so on and so forth. And the impacts are more accentuated because youth is involved in agriculture, women are involved. So we have to deploy cooling and cold chain so that we mitigate the impact the lack of cooling have on this large section of population. So by deploying cooling in an innovative manner, Africa Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooling and Cold Chain is able to really build the capacity, transfer the knowledge in an innovative manner that I will expand on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean-Baptiste, for this and for connecting cooling to yet another dimension, the one around our services and productivity, speaking about agriculture, but also for highlighting one other social dimension, the connection with jobs and in particular the future of our youth and the way that they are leaving the world that is rapidly warming up. Paul, I'm going to you. you probably have guessed it. Same question. Why is cooling important to you?
Is this working? No, it's not. Yes, it is working. Okay, can't quite hear. Thank you. Wow, why is cooling important to me? Well, firstly, I'm Paul Durrant. I have twin roles in the UK's Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. On one hand, I'm head of climate innovation. We use international climate finance to support innovation in developing countries and emerging economies. The second is I'm joint head of the Breakthrough Agenda Secretariat, which is a global framework that tries to strengthen international collaboration in key sectors of the economy. I'm fortunate because I have twin passions. One is fostering innovation, the other is building partnerships, but that's also my job as well. And this is all on some of the key challenges around the energy transition, and cooling is one of the most important but often most crucially overlooked elements of that. So you've heard a few facts and stats from various people. I don't want to sort of repeat too many, but the team provided me with some numbers, and I was quite struck by some of them. 3.5 billion people live in climates defined as hot, the majority of those in developing countries. Another stat that quite shocked me, 12% of total food production is lost due to lack of cold chains. That's enough to feed more than 1 billion people. And I could go on, I've got more stats here, but I won't do it. My point is that this is such a crucial element of the holistic energy transition that we're trying to address. And the other element of this is in terms of the connection between the way in which we tackle that cooling challenge and the wider energy transition. Cooling currently accounts for about a fifth of global electricity demand, and that's expected to double by 2050. And sustainable cooling measures such as passive cooling could save 22 trillion by 2050. So we've got to get this bit of the puzzle right alongside all the rest of it, and that's why it's an important part of our program.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, for that. First of all, I have to say, I don't think one can have too many passions. So we are very happy to have you here on stage to discuss about this. But also, thank you very much for underlying this importance of having holistic, integrated approaches to the energy transition. How do we connect with renewables? How do we connect with smart grids? And how do we make sure the cooling feeds into this process and that we can really amplify the potential of sustainable cooling across the board? So I would like now to move on now to look towards the future. We know what is happening now, we know the needs that we have, we know the challenges, and we know the innovation that is needed. So looking ahead, maybe Jacob, I will start with you. Looking to 2030, looking to 2050, what is that you think that we need to do, the things that we need to do as a priority?
Absolutely. Thank you, Georgia. What I would like to focus on is the latest innovation in three sectors that I mentioned before, in health, agriculture, and space cooling, all of it within the context of off-grid areas in the global south. Now, I'm an engineer, so I like to give specific examples to all of you. So starting with the health sector, there is a UK-based company called Churchill who have been supplying their solar-powered vaccine refrigerators to the UN agencies like UNICEF and the World Health Organization for more than 10 years to protect vaccines from spoilage. Their technology is quite basic but very effective. So basically when it's sunny, it creates ice on the top of the fridge, and then when it's cloudy or overnight, the ice slowly melts and keeps the vaccines always at 4 degrees. Because the beauty of water is that it's the densest at 4 degrees, and that's what most vaccines like to be stored at. So they have been using this technology for more than 10 years, and then with support from Efficiency for Access Research and Development Fund, they were able to redesign this fridge for off-grid solar contexts in sub-Saharan Africa. So they managed to reduce the cost 5 times and then distribute these refrigerators to micro-entrepreneurs in villages in East and West Africa to sell cold milk and cold drinks. Now, of course, this is quite a nice success story, and they have sold thousands of units in East and West Africa, but the challenge is that only 0.2 people in 0.2% of population in sub-Saharan Africa have access to a solar-powered refrigerator in rural areas. So again, the opportunity and the challenge is still huge. Now, moving on to agriculture, as Paul mentioned, if we manage to integrate sustainable cold chain within the agriculture sector, we can save these 12% of the global food produced, and that would save more emissions than the entire global shipping sector. So again, the opportunity is huge from a climate mitigation perspective. There are already some solutions like solar-powered walk-in cold rooms that are used to store fresh produce like fruit, vegetables, meat, and dairy. But these are very expensive to purchase upright. And so some innovative solutions like cooling as a service is needed to make this accessible. Now, this week we published a new report called Cooling Atlas, together with EMPA, Swiss-based research institute, and Wageningen University of Research from the Netherlands, which aims to inform policymakers about all these solutions in the agriculture sector to store fruit and vegetables that include passive and active solutions. Because sometimes I feel like we in the development sector always jump at like the most fancy solution that's usually active, solar powered, but also the most expensive. But in some contexts, more appropriate technologies might be more useful, especially for local markets where the cold chain doesn't have to be as long compared to export. And now, very quickly on the final sector, space cooling, which in off-grid context is the most challenging one. There's only one affordable and accessible solution today, and that's the mighty fan that sits there in the corner. There are solar-powered fans that have been sold only in the past 12 months, 1.2 million of them in East Africa, West Africa, and South Asia by off-grid solar companies. But the challenge with fans is that they only work until the wet bulb temperature. Now that's quite a technical term, but basically when it gets really hot and humid, the fans stop working because our bodies cannot cool down by the circulating air. And so with heat waves that are extreme, like in India 6 months ago when the temperature reached over 50 degrees Celsius, these fans are essentially useless for people to cool down. So we really need new technology solutions for off-grid space cooling for people to essentially survive in these areas. So just to close, I would like to remind everyone when we talk about cooling that off-grid context should be part of the discussion, and especially space cooling is extremely important to have new innovation, because otherwise many people who don't have access today will be in trouble.
Thank you very much for that and for giving us some concrete example of how innovation can indeed make the difference, but also for telling us about innovation in the way that we are financing this solution. You were talking about cooling as a service, so thinking a little bit outside of the box also about that. And then finally, how to think very thoroughly about the solutions that we have. Local solution, sometimes even traditional solution, can help us as long as they are appropriate for that specific need. So thank you very much for that. Jean-Baptiste, maybe go to you with the same question. Looking ahead, you can pick 2030, 2050, your choice. What is the thing that you think we absolutely need to do?
Yeah, thank you so much. In the developing country perspective, we need to scale up really capacity building, training, really to reach critical mass of people to drive access to cooling to so many people who are in the cities, but also who are in the rural area. That is really one aspect, and that aspect we are grateful that UK is supporting the center to do that. We are training community mobilizers, technicians, operators, even policymakers really to be aware of innovations that are out there that are sustainable, and so that also policymakers can really draft policies that enable that access to sustainable cooling. The second aspect is really a technology demonstration to the people who will need to use these technologies, who are in the communities, who are in the rural areas, but also who are in cities. So at the Africa Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooling, we have a space for technology demonstration so that people can see, touch, and really believe it, and that behavior change happens when people can see it during a demonstration. Innovative technologies such as SureChip that my colleague mentioned is also here. We demonstrate it so that people can see that it doesn't use bad refrigerant, it doesn't use it uses solar, and really it can be demonstrated on, and people can see it and be able to access it, maybe buy it if they can. And Third aspect is really in developing countries we are promoting community cooling hubs so that we can accelerate access. So in rural area, typically people live in distant places from one household to another, and we promote access by building community cooling hubs where different community can aggregate their food, can access to medicine that are stored at the hubs, but also can get comfort in seasons of heat wave, and really we need to accelerate the access through such hubs in communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, and really for telling us about also the scale in which these solutions need to be deployed, and also for reminding us people are experiencing the heat. Why not allow them to also experience what it means to be able to utilize and to have access to these solutions that we are developing. And you also reminded us of the importance, of course, of knowledge, demonstration, technical assistance. Paul, I'm going to you.
Yeah, thank you.
What do we need to do by 2050?
Well, we need to do more and more of what we're talking about here. Some great examples from colleagues there of some of the innovative approaches that are already out there. So the first thing, of course, we need to do is to get those deployed on a wider scale, and that will require finance. I might circle back to that later. But we need much more of that type of innovation, and crucially, we need innovation that is adapted to, suitable for the specific context of different countries, different regions, different geographies. So, I mean, with that in mind, across the energy transition, almost half of the emission reductions needed to meet global, actually a third now, it was a half a couple of years ago, it's now a third, need to meet our emission reductions by 2050 come from technologies that aren't yet commercially available. There is a lot of scope to still innovate, to make things better, more efficient, more effective. In cooling, most cooling technologies are highly inefficient, as we're hearing, rely on climate-damaging fluorinated refrigerants, and innovation is scarce in cooling compared to some of the other sectors we look at. We work across multiple sectors, and we're just not seeing the weight of activity and support in cooling that the size of the challenge would justify. And this is where the Ayrton Fund that you've heard about already is really trying to help. So the Ayrton Fund targets its interventions on research, development, and demonstration of clean technologies and business models. It's a $1 billion commitment over 5 years. We're in year 4 now of that commitment, and we hope that it will be extended beyond that to support innovation in developing countries. Crucially, our theory of change is that all countries need to innovate to address their solutions. The idea that solutions developed in major economies could diffuse down to other locations around the world, particularly to developing countries, we just don't think will work for 3 reasons. It's not fast enough. We need innovation to be happening everywhere to tackle the climate crisis at the pace that's needed. It's not fair. There's economic benefits to be got from innovation. That should be realized in all countries and in their locations. And it's probably not effective, because many of the solutions that will work in the UK, for example, will not work in other different contexts, and vice versa. So that's why we're trying to support and encourage innovation in the context of different countries around the world. On cooling, so far, the Ayrton Fund has invested £30 million in projects that have researched and developed and demonstrated sustainable and affordable cooling. For example, the Low Energy Inclusive Appliances project is improving the efficiency, performance, and the availability of affordable off-grid solutions. The IFC's Tech Emerge program, we've funded 97 pilot projects to date on cooling. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. That's the nature of innovation, but many of them are now going on to secure further financing and are edging towards that high level of deployment. And at COP last year, we announced a further 20 million of funding for the Sustainable Cooling Initiatives with IFC, which builds on that Tech Emerge program and is supporting similar projects, and we're seeing a pipeline of things coming through. So there's reason to be optimistic that we're seeing those solutions. The scale is not there yet, but there is the potential to do so much more, and let's exploit it.
Thank you, and also thank you for underlining how you might not succeed at the first attempt, but failing forward is equally important to learn about how to find new strategies and new solutions. So I want to thank very much Jakub, Paul, and Jean-Baptiste for all the insights, the incredible solutions, the challenges that you brought to us, but most of all for keeping this conversation cool. And now a big round of applause to the panelists, please. And Graham, back to you.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much to Georgia and to Melanie for taking us through those discussions, and thanks very much to John Baptiste for joining from Rwanda live. So giving up his Saturday from Rwanda to come and share his thoughts. So today was about a celebration for cooling. And we were trying to celebrate all of the activities that are going on. Before I hand over to Hubert, I just wanted to remind everyone that in about 3/4 of an hour's time, there'll be a drinks reception just here in the UK Pavilion. Please come along, please stay, please have a drink, and please toast cooling. Okay, it's not going away. Okay, and we need to work together better. But I'm going to hand over to a colleague I've got to know really well recently. We're Facebook friends. We're Facebook friends, and we share a lot of common understanding on the topic. He's amazing. Okay, Hubert Zan from Ghana. Over to you, Hubert. Yes. It's going to close.
Okay, so thank you very much, Graham, and quite excited that a lot of conversations went today. I would want to say that all of this should not end as a talk shop. And we heard from the various panels. We all seem to know what we want to do. We all seem to know the right thing to do. But cooling is no more a luxury. You know, coming from where I come from, Ghana, West Africa, cooling is not a luxury because from what Doc said, we are looking at pharmacies, we are looking at post-harvest losses, and we are looking at also the livelihood of the people. And so going into the equipments where air conditioners are needed, before some years behind, when we look at someone who has a house with an air condition, what we think is that this person must be rich. It is no more the narrative. People are saving to be able to get cooling devices. However, equipment technology is also very necessary. And so I was glad when we mentioned about all the types of technology, whether off-grade or on-grade, to make sure that the technology is also meeting some minimum performance standards. And that is why we endorse the cooling pledge. We urge others who are here to come so that we can have an actionable performance on this. And the pledge is here to stay. I don't think it should be one of those narratives where we think it's one of those, pledges that everybody is jumping onto. But we want a pledge that will have action, and we need everybody on board. As I said, cooling is no more a luxury. And we should end here, live here, and make sure that countries are involving cooling in their NDCs as well, so that decisions of COP can also promote cooling together, and we can do it. So, Graham, thank you for the leadership of UK in promoting the cooling pledge, and we hope that there are more things that can be done. I know your temperatures are rising towards 40, in 2022, maybe close to Africa. We live in such situations, but we think that cooling is now something that has come to stay, and we make sure that everybody who is here, staying here for COP, leaving COP to the various countries, should insist that the various agencies that are responsible for cooling should make sure that we are also collaborating. In Africa, last part is that various institutions have various roles to play. The environmental institutes, who are in charge of the Montreal Protocol and the refrigerants and all of that. The climate change units, who are making sure that the NDCs are incorporated into the, requirements of the COP, and also the energy sector that is looking at the efficiency level of the products. We need to harmonize all of this. Harmonize institutions and harmonize the standards for the regional bodies. So this is what I would leave here with, and encourage everyone to make sure that we are championing and having an actionable solutions. Thank you very much, Graham.
Thanks very much, everyone. If anyone wants the photograph, okay, if you email Mel and I, okay, we'll send you a copy of our family photo. And look forward to seeing you in a little while just outside with a drinks reception. So thanks very much again.